Hi, I'm Eddie Burke. I've been the bartender at the Hollywood Improv for 40 years, and this is my podcast, Eddie's Bar at the Improv. Hi guys, this is Eddie Burke, and this is our pandemic episode of Eddie's Bar at the Improv podcast. And boy, do I have a special guest today. I have Silver Saunders Friedman, also known as Silver Saunders and Gamma Shrek. Hi there, Silver. How you doing?
I'm fine, Eddie. How are you?
I'm great. Other than trying to figure this Zoom out, but we're good. I'm really honored. Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, I'm very honored to be here.
Because you are one of the original founders of the Improv way back.
Co-founder.
Right. With Bud, your ex-husband, way back in 1963, yes. I believe.
That's right. That's right.
So take us back a little bit. Tell us how you guys came up with it. Well, first of all, you were a dancer, right? On Broadway.
A singer, a dancer. You had to sing and you had to dance, yeah.
And how'd you end up meeting Bud?
Well, I was on vacation going to Nantucket. And it was the first paid vacation I'd ever had in my life. And I got to Nantucket and I spent a weekend there. And then I was headed for Boston because my producers, Bobby Griffiths and company, wanted, it was opening. They were opening another show called Redhead, I believe. And I wanted to get to Boston. So I took a plane to Boston and I saw the show because it was free. And, in other words, they complimented all the people that ever worked for them, And I was still on vacation, but it was part of my vacation. And I then spent a night with them, not overnight, but I'm saying I spent a night with a party after work, people in show business, how it goes. Uh-huh. And all I know is afterwards, I went home to my hotel and left a call for about 7 o'clock in the morning because I had a 10 or an 11 o'clock flight back to New York. And when I did that, I overslept in the morning. And I didn't get on the next plane until about 12 or 1 o'clock. And I had to come and be standby because I missed my first call. So all I know is I went into the line to wait to get on the plane after I'd been officially recognized that I could get on the plane. And a man behind me said to me, "I bet you're from New York." Now, this plane was going to New York. So I couldn't understand why he would need to talk about that. But I said, yes, and what does it matter? And I'm kind of, I'm a bit of a difficult person at first. I have boundary lines that are huge. And he said, because of the way...
New York?
No, I was born here.
Oh, okay.
I know, it's terrible. I mean,
I don't think so, but go ahead.
Well, the reason I say that, it's another story. I was born here because my parents were married 16 years without children, and I guess I was a surprise. And I came along in the 16th year, and they were here in California because my father was a journalist for Hollywood Reporter. Variety, I'm sorry. So anyway, we'll put that on the table for later. But what I am trying to get across is that I was a little defensive. And he said, because of the way you're dressed. And I was dressed kind of like I dress in New York. And I said to him, oh, well, okay. And he didn't make me have to say thank you or anything. And I just kept going. They canceled the flight, postponed it. And I had another hour and a half or something. And when that happened, that announcement, this man behind me that said, "I bet you're from New York," said, "Can I buy you a drink?" And it's now like 1 o'clock or going to be 1 o'clock any minute. And I said, "I don't drink in the daytime, but I do drink. I mean, not now, but I did drink." And all I know is I said, "No, I'll have a tomato juice or something, a Bloody Mary without the blood." And he goes, "Okay." And so we went to the nearest place at the airport, in the airport. And I ended up, enjoying about an hour's company. And then I let him pay the check, and I got up, said thank you very much, and went back online. That was that. Well, the next thing I know, The next thing I know is that I'm moving in the line and I'm getting on the plane and he's in his seat already. And he's waving. And he saved a seat for me. And he
the
was
man moves fast, didn't he?
yeah, fast mover. And so all I know is I took it, and we got to know each other rather well in the sense of who we were and what we were doing and why we were going to New York. And it turned out that his mother lived in Queens and he was coming from Boston. He was coming from where he lived because that's where he was residing now. And he went and visited his mother from time to time in Queens. That's that story. That's how we met.
Okay.
And when he got off the plane, he said, "Can I have your phone number?" Now, I didn't get into the fact that he may have a girlfriend or anything like that. It wasn't on that level at all. And I said, "I'll give you backstage. I'll give you the number backstage." And that's what I did because I didn't want him calling at home.
Right.
And so it turns out that he called backstage one night. I said after 8 o'clock or before 8, something like that. And he did call and he wanted theater tickets.
Ah.
And we were a Pulitzer play hit. It was Fiorello. And I said, I'll try to get them for you, but I don't pay for them. You pay for them. And he said, yes, I understand. But they were discounted. You got 2 for rate. So it turned out that
right up Bud's alley. I love it.
Well, that's right. But wait till you hear what the button is. The button is that he was waiting for me after that night show, which was like the following night that he called, because the people in the show, the personnel, as we would call it, got 2 or 3 tickets a week orders. You could have 3 or 4 orders, whatever it was. So I had him as a single on order. And then he was waiting for me at the stage door. And my friends and I came out the stage door. And he was under a canopy, not quite at the stage door, but around it. And it was a restaurant called Confucius on 52nd Street. And all I know is I said, I said to my friends, I think this is the guy that I got tickets for, I wasn't even sure it was the same person because he said silver, And so I ended up standing there with my friends and he said, "Can I buy you a drink?" Again, like the airport. And so I said, "Well, I don't want to walk in the rain." It was raining. I said, "Could we just go to Confucius here?" He said, "Yeah." And it was a place that the show people went to and I felt safe there. All I know is I didn't know what this guy's game was at all. We sat there till closing, which would be 4 o'clock in the morning, and we talked about business. He wanted to know what people on Broadway got paid. He wanted to know what I got paid. He wanted to know where I'd been before I got paid.
And what you're going to do with your money, huh?
Well, maybe. But I didn't have that kind of money. All I know is that we weren't getting paid in the chorus that much, And we had just started the maneuvering for a strike. We had been on 46th Street and we went into strike and ended up on 52nd when we came back to work. And we weren't making that much money. I was making a little more than somebody else because I had some extra understudy pay. But basically, it's much better now. Right. Equity has really stepped up and tried to protect the members. But it was, we're talking pittance here. And over $100 and whatever bonuses you could arrange, So, you were lucky if you came home with a $100 clerk per week, And it was a good job, so you didn't complain that much. But when it came time to really follow the dots and understand how much money they were making from us, and the guy that was running the guild, the Producers Guild, that guy, Herman Schimmler, I think his name was, he said, and that's what triggered the strike. He said, "You show me somebody who's worth $104 a week." Oh my God. The singers, the dancers, the actors, they went nuts on that. And it was very important that we claimed our turf. Yeah.
And he was trying to find out all this information because he was interested in producing.
Yes. But I didn't know that exactly then. But that's what that's what the whole game was. Right. And it happened through the improv. The improv is definitely a production. We didn't know that at the time, Eddie.
No, I know it. Who could imagine back then? I'm sure. So when did you guys get married?
April of '63 was the first wedding,
The first wedding?
Yes. And that was done at a hotel with family and friends at midnight, April in the 20s. I think it was the 21st or something. It was April. And that was 63. And then we found out, maybe Bud knew all along, I don't know, but we had an uncle, Gene, who found out that the guy that married us, who was a judge from Queens that he knew, was off the bench when he married us. And he needed a 30-day window before he could be reinstated if he was. We weren't even sure he was going to be reinstated. So we weren't really officially married. And I was absolutely wild-eyed because I felt I had been duped. And I have a paranoia streak in me from a lot of things. And I was very, very upset. And so upset that my body broke out with some condition on the honeymoon, because we were told the night of the wedding in April that this wasn't valid.
Oh my
then we
God.
went on the honeymoon anyway because we had the tickets and the whole thing.
And it was all paid for, yeah.
Yeah. And all I know is that I really, my body responded very immediately. And I ended up not being good company for a while.
So when did you get married the second time?
Yes,
Officially?
and we went to City Hall about a month later when we could reorganize our witnesses, which
Brilliant.
my best friend and his best friend. And that's that.
How did you guys come up with the idea of the improv?
Well, that goes back to the night that he waited for me in the rain, and we went to sit for 4 hours or more at the Chinese restaurant.
Confucius?
Yeah, Confucius. And while we were there and talking about numbers and people working and not working and the general environment of the theater, I said, what they really need up here for what we called a gypsy. We were gypsies. We traveled. The work was there, you traveled, you know. And that's how that came out of the 30s or 40s. All I know is I said, what the gypsies really need here is a place like the Village. We have to bring the Village uptown. And he said, oh. I said, yeah, like a coffee house. There's nothing like that here. And that's cheaper than the bars. And later you can worry about the bar. But right now, if they could get a cup of coffee and a piece of pie for under $10, that would be terrific. He said, oh, okay. The next day, within that next week, he went hunting for spaces in Times Square for this. And he came back on about 3 days later and said, I found the space. I want you to look at it. And it was the 44th Street location. And it was cheap rent. He'd made the phone calls. He'd done the legwork. And it was painted red, fire engine red, inside and out. And we had to take all of that down with hydrochloric acid. And
how was that when you guys started building it or whatever?
Right.
What was your goal? Just simply to have a place to hang out for all the Broadway people?
No, Bud had a friend called Aaron Heller. And Aaron Heller was an artist. In his heart, he was an artist. But he liked to do things with space. And so Bud called him, and Bud asked him to try to visualize what we thought we needed. And it wasn't so much that we needed entertainment. We just needed a place that was like New England. And then it had to feel like the Village. And it had to have a kitchen. And can we make all of this happen? And he looked at the space and he came back with paper renderings. And it was exactly very close to what we ended up with. He was quite good, quite good. And
so how long from the time you started working on it till it actually opened?
Well, I think a month. We worked night and day. I would go there during the day if I didn't work until the nighttime. And I would also have friends that were on the same schedule.
Right.
All of us were
to help out.
But yeah. And Sunday was our big day. In other words, we had about 4 Sundays that really made the difference. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And when you did open, what was that? What was the original opening like? I mean, did you have people coming in?
Well, we had the friends. We had the friends that had helped us, and we had their friends. And then I announced in my show that we were having an official opening. and they were invited for a cup of coffee. And I think a lot of the people did that. So we had a proper amount of people, and it was the first time we filled. The seats originally were 125, and we eventually made it 150. And that was, like pushing the walls out or something.
Right.
We didn't. Yeah, it wasn't quite like structural engineering, but we had to replace. See, they didn't have a 6-foot thing like we have now.
Yeah,
so you
that
could
they
sit
will
on
have,
top
right?
of somebody.
You just
Evil was
squeeze.
to sit on top of evil.
That's right.
In New York,
Just squeeze it all in. So, when did you start getting people of note to come in, like celebrities or whatever?
Well,
how did they find the place?
The word in the theater, it's a very closed community. And when someone like Donna McKechnie, who was my pal, I don't know if you ever heard of her, but she was very, very hot.
What's her name again?
Donna McKechnie.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I know the name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, she was an outstanding dancer and talent. But she sat in the chorus room with me while we put our makeup on. And we ended up being friends, and I kind of mothered her. She was younger than I was by a few years. Now she's in my age range. That's how people evolve over the time, is that you consider them young and vital and all of that, and then they get older and they look like just anybody else. I mean, all that stuff that you get hired for in the theater goes away. Pretty much. Though I did say I saw Jane Fonda the other night on Zoom with Seth Meyers. And I will tell you, she was classic. I mean, absolutely fantastic. She
always is.
Yeah.
Who were the first? Well, I guess they might not have even been celebrities back then.
No, well, they would come not on a regular basis, but on a night where you would get paid, for instance, you would have a celebrity kind of feeling about the place. And Bobby Morris would come in, and Charlie Nelson Riley, and they would get up and do nonsense. I mean, fun nonsense. It was all improvisational. And we had not known until we opened the doors what we were going to call it. And a friend of mine from the theater of Fiorello, Bob Murdoch, God rest his soul, and he was our pianist. He was our original pianist. And I had a piano that I had won years ago, and I gave it to the Improv for 4 stock points. I mean, Anyway, I got stock on it. So it turned out that he said to Bud and I, walking through the Improv at that point in time where we were about to open the next day or something, he said, what are you calling it? It's like having a baby, what are you going to call it? And I said, I don't know whether we know what we're doing, Bob. He said, then call it Improv.
Okay.
And we looked at each other, and I said, would improvisation be too long? And Bud said, no, that's good. So all I know is that's how it evolved. And
that's very interesting. I've all the stories that I've heard, I've never heard that one, how it was actually named.
Yeah.
And that's very interesting. So how many years were you and Bud there at the New York Improv?
Well, he and I went to California together. We were still a family, and that was 1975. Okay. And he was getting ready to move out here, and of course we were going to follow him, and that happened. That went okay. And once we got located out here and the doors opened here, there's something, Eddie, I don't know. Did you ever come here and get married? Were you married ever when you were here?
Yeah, I got married in LA, yeah.
And how long did you stay married?
I'm still married.
Oh, good. Oh, so, good. You're an exception.
Yes, I know.
Yeah. And what happens out here is the strangest cultural, I know. Event. Yeah. And I don't even know. I call it running away from home. That's what I call it.
Okay.
Yeah. And soon after we were here, and that means within the next few years, he had run away from home. I tolerated it for a while, and then I couldn't. And right. there's a lot of stuff under that statement. I couldn't play the game anymore, and So I left in 1979 and went back to
Right, because
York with the kids.
when I first came to the Improv, which was 78 or 79, you were just leaving or
Yeah,
just gone.
I was getting on the plane. Yeah.
Right. I remember you in this, and correct me if I'm wrong, in this like little Zohan ticket booth.
Say it again.
Uh,
Zohan, what?
like Adam Sandler's movie, The Zohan, where
Oh, yeah.
did you have this little, where you sold tickets in this little
Yes,
booth?
yes, yes, yes,
Yeah, I mean, I remember that so vividly. I don't know why,
yes. Yeah.
but that was, it
I, I,
was
I took money in a cage.
right. Yes, exactly. So when you so you went back to New York.
Yes, with
And
the children because I didn't want them here because the education was questionable.
right.
I wanted
And
them to have a decent education.
okay, and when you and Bud got divorced, you got the New York Improv
Yeah.
and you ran that. How was that running that when you first did that? How was that running it by yourself now all of a sudden?
Well, because I had started right from the first paint job,
Mhm.
the first facelift, I I had no problems. I had no anxiety about it at all. I knew where every plug was. I knew where every crack and crevice was.
Right.
The biggest problem that went with it was the crossover from the staff that had run it prior to my arrival, and that was Chris Albrecht
Hmm.
and whoever he had for his support team, right? Meaning
Right.
staff. And that was the biggest problem because Chris had not been, his interpretation was that he had not been notified correctly of the transfer of power, and he had not gotten what he needed, whatever that
Okay.
was. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I can tell you what he got. And I think he did okay. Okay. So, because I had to buy him out.
Right.
And because he took this stance that he wasn't notified. And I didn't want to be.
So in other words, when you guys moved out together to LA, Chris bought in to the club in New York?
Yes, he bought a share for 20,000. That's
Okay.
right.
And
Not more than a share, but about, I think he
right.
got 15 or 20%. Yeah.
Okay. And so then when you went back, you took over
Yes.
and you
And he
started
said he
running it.
wasn't, he said he didn't have enough notification or a proper notification. He was unhappy. He was unhappy.
That's Chris Albrecht. So now you're running the New York Improv. And
Then I was.
well, yes,
Yeah,
then you were. I mean, the New York Improv is obviously the flagship of
Yeah,
everything.
that's right.
I mean, not just the improv chain, but I think of all stand-up comedy clubs.
Right.
And had there not been an improv, the comedy scene would be very different today.
Well, the only people that had an edge at all was a guy in Brooklyn. I can't remember his name right now, and he was an old timer, and he knew his bar business, and he had been importing comics into this Brooklyn.
Important, yeah.
And they were finding, and there seemed to be a very unplanned urge for comics to evolve. In other words, what I'm saying is more metaphysical than anything. There are times in life, and this is one of them for us in the world, is that things come along that you don't know how to even name. You can't even find the language for it. And basically, when that happens, you know that there's some urge metaphysically for you to recognize it. You have to recognize it, and it's either a friend or a foe. Yeah.
Right.
This was definitely happening in Brooklyn. We didn't know about it until the comics told us when we started using comics. And when they came into our world, then we found out that there had been some action in Brooklyn. And but we didn't open to compete with Brooklyn. But maybe if we hadn't existed, Brooklyn would have taken over the urge or the impulse. I don't know.
How did the improv in New York morph from let's say a variety type of club where everybody singing, dancing, whatever, to stand up?
Well, we got more stand-ups more regularly, though we wouldn't have called them stand-ups right then. We didn't know enough about who was a stand-up even. In other words, the stand-ups knew who were stand-ups.
Right, yeah.
We only knew they were people. And they would say to us, you should look at this guy. He's fun, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so he'd bring a friend in, whoever that was. And then another stand-up would say, I got another friend. And that would kind of evolve into what we call a baseball team. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. And after you got people from the Village, which was Richard Pryor,
Right.
then even though we didn't know the potential of Richard entirely, we saw what everybody finally saw about David. Yeah. So when he claimed to be from the Village, he knew a ton of comics from the Village. That's where they had found their stage time. You know,
where did they perform in the Village?
Well, there were different places on Bleecker, and the guy
was the
that
Village Gate already there?
Yeah, it was, but it was mainly music at that time, and we
Right.
were comedy kind of evolved out of that music wave, and so what you do know and remember is that the flood or the wave comes at you, and then you say, "This must be the way to go."
Yes.
So
go with the wave.
That's right, and you end up realizing tremendous talent, and so therefore you honor it. In other words, you give it time and you give it the proper cuddling.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, who are some of the people that you can remember offhand that got their starts there at the Improv? In New York?
Stiller and Mira, Richard Pryor, David Brenner came from Brooklyn. He was one of the imports from Brooklyn. And that's not all.
Isn't that very funny? Because, you know, I'm from New York, so Brooklyn is very close, an import from Brooklyn. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it is now one of the most outstanding boroughs in New York because of all the deaths from there.
Right.
That I noticed tremendously when I saw the numbers evolving in this wave of shit that we have. And I said to myself, oh God, and that was one of the newest fronts for all the artistic people. A lot of people that couldn't pay Manhattan rent ended up going and finding some cave in Brooklyn. Yeah. But when we got somebody from Brooklyn, it was because we were friends with Brooklyn, and you know, the guy Bud made friends with that owner, and then they all felt comfortable coming. And that didn't mean they couldn't work in Brooklyn. It just meant they had a couple of nights in New York and whatever.
So you had Pryor, you had David Brenner, you had Richard Lewis, I assume.
No, that was much later, and he was not from any of the clubs that I know. I think he auditioned on a basis of friendship. I think, if I recall, he came in on recommendation. A lot of them did. You know, that once you have a baseball team, the players know all the other baseball team players.
Right. I like your analogy, because the Improv did have a Broadway show league team, did it not?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Yes, I do remember that.
Were you in New York at that time?
Yes.
And
yeah.
In fact,
I actually played in the Broadway show league for Catch a Rising Star.
Oh yeah. And where you work out? Did you work out as a comic there?
No, I was never a comic. An actor, yes, but never a comic. I don't have the guts to get up there.
Yeah, it takes courage. It does. It takes courage.
And get that feedback immediately.
But you have courage for this.
What's that?
You have courage for this.
Oh, this is fun. This is, you know, when I have people like you, I mean, I'm learning so much. This is really great.
Yeah. But I have a podcast. I understand.
What's the name of your podcast?
The Sandbox with Gamma Shrek and Friends.
Okay. Everybody get that? The Sandbox with Gamma Shrek. We'll mention that again. So you've got all these people now. Some of the names that I kind of remember. I was never at the club in New York.
And that's because of Catch?
No. I didn't go to Catch. Actually, I was brought in to play for them. I was a teacher in New York.
And
I was brought in to play what?
Where did you teach?
In Harlem on 149th Street and 7th Avenue.
For public school?
Yep. It was called Frederick Douglass Intermediate School.
I know that housing complex, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Well,
right.
you had more courage than you know.
Yeah. Well, it was for another time. It was a great experience, and because I was also a dean, a behavioral counselor, so it was quite an experience. But
Good.
getting back to you,
Oh,
the
oh, now you've gone too far.
the I wasn't involved in the comedy scene at all, other than maybe somebody dragging me to a show somewhere, and I played for catch simply because I was very good. They brought me in as kind of like a ringer
Yeah.
in their
I
championship game.
understand. I understand.
Yeah, and that was my experience in the Broadway show league, because
So,
I used to hang out at Dr. Generosity's. Do you remember
yeah. Yeah, I
that?
never went there, but yeah,
Yeah, that was just a bar and
I know.
yeah.
I know a lot of bars,
Yes, I know. In New
but
York,
I
you
never
did.
made it over there.
You don't know what you're missing. But then,
I went to my
start
hangout with Jimmy Ray's.
with who? Oh, Joe. Oh,
Jimmy,
yes. Okay.
Jimmy Ray's
Hmm.
on 8th Avenue.
What do you think is how has comedy changed from when you started to like now?
The essential ingredient in anyone being funny is spontaneity. It
Hmm.
has to feel like it's coming at you the minute you think of it. It has to feel improvisational.
Right.
It has to feel like it wasn't rehearsed.
Hmm.
Now, I'll give you an example. Jimmy Walker had a nice career, but when we had a mirror on the very back wall going that way, and the stage faced that, and it was a huge mirror, and it made the room bigger. You know what I mean? That's why it's there. And Jimmy Walker would get up and do his stand up to the mirror.
Okay.
And he would make faces like he would if he were home in his bathroom. And he would
Right.
do rehearsed things. Now, he wouldn't or couldn't change his habits. And what's really interesting is that he didn't do much stand up, really. I mean, he did start out that way. But when he got famous, it was because he was on camera and he ended up doing that character in whatever the name of Happy Days was, it or something?
JJ. Yeah.
Yeah. And he ended up making faces to the camera just like he had to the mirror.
Okay.
And it was rehearsed. And I thought Jimmy was a nice guy. There was nothing wrong with Jimmy as a person, but his technique was terrible. And it was not stand up. I mean, if you'd had 15 minutes of that, you had anything he had to offer.
Right.
And it wasn't spontaneous.
And so, as that being, being said, how has comedy changed
Yeah,
from
there's
that?
less spontaneity.
So you're
That was
saying
my
there
whole
is no
point.
spontaneity basically today?
There's less of it,
There's
much
less
less
of
of
it.
it. Jimmy Kimmel has the most spontaneity of all the hosts that are on TV, and
Right.
Seth Meyers. Both of them know that ingredient is important.
Hmm.
And that's why I think David Letterman crowned Seth Meyers. And he also crowned him because he's out of the 11:30 slot. In other words, he didn't want to make enemies with the 11:30 bunch. You
Right.
know? So he took somebody that he really liked from the 12:30 slot.
Hmm.
And Seth is really good. He's very good. So it wasn't a mistake.
Right.
But that spontaneity where you can hear Jimmy Kimmel do a whole day of our crap in this country, especially in California, and he
Hmm.
can wrap it up as if he just thought of it that minute. And it's fantastic. I
Yeah,
watch it every night.
I don't watch very much late night stuff, but I do know that the few times, because I'll watch everybody a little bit at some point.
Right.
Kimmel to me seems to be his spontaneity comes from the heart.
Yes.
You
That's
know,
where it is. That's
yeah.
exactly where it is.
He usually speaks how he feels
That's right.
from what I've seen.
That's right. And all the great ones have done that.
Yeah, and it's an interesting concept because, like you said, I've seen it change too from way back when I started working at the club, you had at the Improv in L.A. You had George Wallace, you had Jerry Seinfeld,
Yeah,
you
well,
had
Jerry has spontaneity.
yeah,
But the
and
only thing, when you watch him on his show, and that's in reruns, as you know, probably, but
mhm.
I'm a late night person, so I watch all of it. I can't, when I can. All right. In other words, I watch Jimmy Kimmel and then I'll go over here and watch something else because I really am an addict of comedy. I really love it. The first laugh to a comic I ever had was in Chicago with Mort Saul. And I was
Okay,
20 years old, and I didn't even know I was going to be in comedy, but I recognized it the minute I heard it and saw it and felt it. I knew what it was.
yeah. Did getting back to the New York club?
Yes.
Uh, when did it close?
Well, technically, we were shut down with bankruptcy in September, or maybe the latter part of August of 1993.
So had business just declined? It was just getting
Yeah,
tougher.
essentially, there was two factors. We had 24-hour television comedy with HBO.
Right.
Anybody doesn't could do anything all day long and not have to pay a cover to
Hmm.
watch mediocre comedy, perhaps, and some great ones as well. I mean, it was a mix, but that was a big factor.
Right.
That took about 10 or 20% of our crowd away. Then we had what we call pre-millennial centennial. That's right, and that was New York trying to put lipstick on all the wrong areas of the city.
Right.
And by
Hmm.
that, I'm saying Ninth Avenue and 44th was not a wholesome area.
Not that.
It,
That's being
it
kind.
yeah, it would be need a lot of lipstick, right? So it essentially you had something local pushing this way, and you had something national in some ways from what we call the global perspective, and you couldn't get away from either of them, and they were pressing down. And we would do a monthly thing with the concierges at the hotels, and they would send us their guests, and we would give them discounts and treat them special.
Right.
And I started to call again. By that I'm saying when the numbers told me I needed to pump it up, I said, we're going to change it over to once a week.
Uh,
And she said to me, one of the concierges, we can't send people down that street anymore.
oh God.
And
Yeah.
I said, they don't take cabs from your hotel. And she said, well, they could, but then they have to find one going home.
Right. That's right. They'd
Yeah,
have to step
yeah,
out. Well, they didn't call it that area Hell's Kitchen for nothing.
that's right.
You know,
That's right. So
it was a tough area.
it was better earlier than later. When it got past the 90s and they were getting ready to be this wonderful, attractive city for the
Hmm.
2000, when that happened, all hell broke loose. And,
Right.
you know,
So
yeah,
after you closed the actual Improv, did you keep it going
yeah,
anywhere else?
I made the effort to what we call in my world, in my jargon and how I see things, I would call it now a floating crap game. And the reason I call it that is because I had a weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a half a week, at a place that was very legal and very straightforward. And I was able to do shows there. And it was a smaller venue, and it was called Shutters. Talk
Okay.
about ironic, right? And so the guy, let me. He didn't have nighttime trade after dinner hour, and so we had a thing from 9 until 12, and a shorter show. But the intention was to keep the young unknowns working, to try to get them to get developed, because we had really gotten a badge for that.
Right.
So
That is that is one of the things the Improv is known for, is
yeah,
giving
right,
people a break and
right.
starting over, not over, starting up, and getting a place to, what is it, hone your craft, so to
That's
speak.
right, and make mistakes. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. How
So
long did that go on? Did the shuttle?
well, I was there too long. By that I'm saying I found the location uh, not dangerous at all, but it was like it didn't exist. People said, "Where are you again?" You know? And it was at 10th Avenue, between 9th and 10th, very close to a street, a boulevard, and I can't remember. It was 44th to 40. What the hell is the jump? The jump was closed, but it was at 10th Avenue.
Okay.
And the 10th Avenue area was not disgusting like 9th Avenue. In other words, people weren't peeing on the street yet. So I said to myself, you know, this is okay. It wasn't dangerous, and it wasn't. But enough people were disinterested, right, that I couldn't stay there too long. But I did, because it was a very low rent, and I could function there and still say the Improv was going. It was pride. It was my pride. And
I understand. So how long did it last?
Well, then I jumped over to 46th Street to a wonderful place that had 2 rooms, the dining room area and then a back showroom. And a lot of people that had some significant careers would play that back room. And so I went and talked to that owner, and Danny, his name was Danny. It was called Danny something. And it may still be there, I don't know, but it had a reputation, and it was a clean house, as we would say. And so it turned out that I did that next, and I jumped there for another 2 years. So I didn't give up the battle until 99. 99. So I had like 3 years at one place and 3 years at another. I think it was like that.
That's really a pretty good run, because when you think about it, you know, comedy had its big boom in the 80s, and the 90s kind of slowed it down a little bit with some of the reasons that you said, in terms of being able to watch it on TV and that sort of thing. And to last till like 99 or even there is pretty darn good, I think. And even though the name is the Improv, you know, it's people stop going out. We've run into that out here now too. You've got, why go out and spend $100 as a couple when you can turn on Comedy Central or Netflix or what have you, and see the same people for free, without having to pay.
Well, if you pay for your monthly.
Well, yeah, but $14.95 a month as opposed to $100 a night.
Well, of course,
is
what service does it for $14.95? you got an inroad.
No, is it Netflix?
It was $8, so it might be $14.95.
Oh, I don't know. I just made that number up. It sounds nice to me.
But that's a good number.
I think I saw. I think I saw that number on my bank statement for something.
Yeah.
I just said
that's right. That's probably
$14.95. I mean, it could be anything.
Well, some of it is very high. In other words, what's the one? The new one. Not Supreme, Suspect. No, what is that?
Quibi's out there?
No. The one that does 3 things for, like, I'll think of it at 3:00 in the morning when I get up to anyway, whatever. I have a friend who just signed up for this thing that I'm trying to, and it advertises on TV 24 hours a day. I mean, they're spending a fortune to get members, and their membership rate is $44.95 or 99 cents per service, per internet, per phone, so you're paying over $100.
It's not Hulu, is it?
No, Hulu's built in. No.
Yeah.
No, this is not that. I'll think of it, but it's anyway, it doesn't matter.
Did you ever expect, I mean, in your wildest imagination, that like the Improv itself would have changed into what it is right now in terms of franchises all over the country? You know, just the brand is phenomenal.
No, an absolute no. I would never have expected that. And what I learned along the way, which is really my mantra, is what have I learned today? Is
what have you learned today, Silver?
Well, then I'm very relaxed with you, Eddie.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have dread about this at all. I knew I had material, and I knew I could. I didn't rehearse it. I knew it was organic and all of that. But what I'm saying is I do best when I don't feel resentment,
Right.
or I don't feel threatened.
Hmm.
And I don't feel any of those things with you. I mean, I really honor you. And I think there's something about surviving that, when they say somebody's a such and such survivor, and we'll be
Right.
survivors again, but you
Hmm.
survived your life.
Yeah.
And I survived my life.
Right.
And what that does is give you a certain amount of faith, I guess, that everything's maybe okay. We're not
Yeah.
sure it's going to be okay, but
It's
we think it
interesting.
might be. Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because as I've gotten older, I know that, my outlook on things and even on the past has changed quite a bit.
Right.
And you do become more comfortable with things as you said, and to be able to talk with someone, and I call it conversating,
Right.
conversate with somebody is kind of, a peaceful thing.
Mhm.
If so many of the shows are confrontational, and
Yes. Yes.
this
Yeah.
is by no means that. This is just simply, basically, in this case, an oral history of you,
Well, of
which
the
which
improv.
has,
Of the improv. Yeah.
well, but the improv, yeah, but you were one of the two original founders
Yes,
of
I know.
of the improv. This
I
is
know.
not well, we opened it in LA after whatever. You guys, you and Bud started this whole thing,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, you don't get as much recognition
Yeah. Right.
as you should, because
Well, I don't know about should, but I know that the moment of recognition is gone.
yeah,
That's
well,
what I
right.
know.
I
Yeah.
know it gets to the point.
And
It
I'm
gets to the
accepting.
point
I
where it doesn't.
accept it. I accept it. I accept
Yeah,
it.
no, it's. I guess it is what it is at this point.
Yeah.
But the
Is
fact,
it? Yeah.
the
Go
fact
ahead.
that the fact that everything has changed so much for me in terms of comedy. I mean, I am very thankful in a lot of ways that like the comedians have let me in their world. I am not a comedian,
Yeah.
and getting to know all these guys, and very few people know like my history. I was a son of an entertainer in the Catskill Mountains
Right.
in New York. And my father gave Rodney Dangerfield one of his first jobs
Oh.
when he became Rodney Dangerfield
Ah.
up
Okay.
in the Catskill Mountains. My father, he had Jackie Mason up there, so like I have a background,
Did he
but
have Buddy Hackett?
no, because Buddy Hackett played at like the Concord and Grossinger's.
Okay.
Yeah, those were the two big, and the Raleigh. Those were the
Yeah.
three big places in the Catskills. My father worked at a place called Gibbers, which I would assume is like one level down from them. So he got Rodney Dangerfield and he got Jackie Mason
Right.
and
Right.
people like that.
Were
But
you the connection for Jackie Mason doing the kitchen at the Improv?
yes, well, no, I wasn't the connection. No, he. But I remember, God, when he did that, his everything else aside for the moment, he did something I thought was great when he opened it, which was having everybody's handprint,
Yeah.
all the celebrities that came in, put on the wall.
Uh huh. Uh huh.
And unfortunately, because of whatever falling out there was with him and Bud and Mark, they painted over it as soon as he was gone. But that would have been a great memento
Yes, it
back
would have
then,
been. That was
having
good.
that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But,
he I can't remember how long, but there was a kind of an aggressive parting of the ways,
I'll
to,
say
to say the
you don't
least.
know anything about that, but I do. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure
And
you
I'm
know a
not going to
lot.
talk about it.
I
Yeah.
mention it now and then, but
No,
that's
no, no. I mean, I don't talk about it because it's really Bud's turf. In other
right.
words, if Bud wants to talk about it, he can, and I don't think he would. But basically, after all of the fracas that did occur, Jackie Mason came into the New York Club because it was after 1980, right? And
Right.
the thing had been settled somewhere in that year.
Hmm.
the deal had been closed.
Right.
And he came with a friend of the Improv, a comic, and we, sat him down. And when he walked by me, because I'm at the door a lot when I used to do it, and he gave me this kind of friendly, daring look.
Mhm.
And I wasn't a fan of his from the first movie, but after whatever had happened, I didn't feel I owed him anything.
Right.
But I did buy him a drink.
Which I'm
Anyway,
sure he appreciated,
well, I
really.
don't know about that. But when he left, which was about an hour or so later, because he watched the show and he sat with the comic that brought him and the whole thing, he walked by and that look was still there. And then he said to me, "So what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this?" And I said, "I don't talk about it." And he knew what I meant. He knew what I meant.
Yeah.
He knew. And he said, "Had a good time. See you later." And he, left in a breeze. And I was glad that I had not invested in that moment. I was very glad.
Right. Well, it's funny. I was around then, and I do remember there, Bud and Mark hiring armed off-duty
Oh
police
yeah. Oh yeah.
officers, to
That,
to
that's
uh, to
that's
watch
right.
the door, and it was a pretty tense time.
Oh, oh yeah.
But there were a lot of people that came along even after that kind of concessioned everything out in the LA club. But the New York club again is, it's the flagship. It's the brick wall.
I
It,
know.
it's
I know.
I know you
We
know
had
it.
no idea when we took the red paint off of the wall that wall was going to be standard equipment.
Right, and I read.
No way did we know that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I read that the brick wall was there because you guys couldn't afford to cover it up.
We took the red paint off, and when we decided to leave it in the raw state that it was, which is this wonderful brick wall.
Mm-hmm.
But then there was other stuff that, was kind of complementary to the whole environment. It was okay. It didn't stand out and hit you in the head. And
Right.
we were having the shows on the window wall on 44th Street, and that wasn't covered up entirely. And we would get people from the street, which were plenty, and they would make faces and carry on. And we had to move it to the brick wall. We had to move the stage over there. And that all happened in the first year. In other words, we had to change where the stage was right away as soon as possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
That had to be a busy first year.
Right.
Is there a period of time that sticks out to you, or a period of a certain type of comic that sticks out that
Oh yeah.
was there?
Well, the reason I say "oh yeah" is because do you have time for this?
Oh yes, go ahead.
Okay. Bud and I did love the theater. He was a theater bug. And it turned out that we went to see this play that we'd heard a comic was in from Jack Rollins, that he managed him, and it was Bob Klein.
Mm-hmm.
And Jack Rollins said, "Go see the show." And I think he got us comps. I'm not sure about that. But we went to see Apple. It had Apple in it. Not Johnny Appleseed. It was about the Garden of Eden and the apple in the Garden of Eden. And it was a comedy. And Bob Klein was in it. He didn't play the snake. I forget what he played. But we went to see it. And then we stood and said hello to him afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Can I join you and walk over to the club?" And he walked with us. It was in Times Square. And we walked back to the club. And then he said to Bud, "Could I go on?" And of course, Bud is not going to say no. It's Jack
Absolutely
Rollins
not.
client.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it turned out it was a smash, and that was early Bob Klein, but you could see it right there, and that was the joy of what we both had.
Right.
We could see what they really had in the beginning, and when I had two kids that I loved very much, and Bud too, he was a good father, and he ended up needing me to come down one night, and I didn't have a babysitter, and I said, "Well, just ask the act back. Don't make me have to come down." And he said, "Okay." So it was Bette Midler who'd come in with a friend of mine from Broadway, Helen Verbit, and Helen said to Bud, she's in violin, the Jewish musical.
Fiddler on the Roof.
A Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah, Fiddler on the Roof.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks, Zoe. And it turns out that we ended up doing it the next night, and I had to be there. So I got a babysitter, which I had kind of in my Rolodex. And I ended up going down to give Bud support because he didn't know whether she had it or not. She was very out of the box, as you know. And I watched it and I said, oh, yeah, this is good. And that's what we did. We kind of encouraged both of us to pay attention to what that person did. What was it that they do? And that's how that's our function. That was our function.
I think that, that has to be a magical moment at when you find people like that.
Oh, it is.
Or that you have moments like that where you go like,
right,
this guy's got it. This woman's got it. This is, they're just it. Because, a lot of people still make it anyway, but they develop. Right. And they grow along the way, but there are some that you just look at and watch and you go like,
yeah, I know.
There's no way this person does
Andy Kaufman was one of those experiences. I mean, we had a lot of them in the sense of a Bette Midler and a Richard Pryor and a Bob Klein and all of that early stuff. Andy came along after the first wave and he auditioned on a Sunday. And he did his 5 minutes, I think it was. And Bud then said, can you come back and do another set other than what you did? And he did a good set, but it wasn't finished. You know, there was something about Andy that everything hung in space. It never hit the ground. And so basically what Bud encouraged was him to grow and to bring more back, bring us other stuff. Mm-hmm. And when Andy was leaving, and as he had come in, I was at the door, and I remember saying to him, and I have a picture at home in my bedroom with him doing his stuff at a coffee diner or something. Anyway, it was a publicity thing, and it's on my front, one of my improv treasures. And I remember seeing him walk in the door, and there was, I could see it. I mean, there just in his energy alone. And I said, after he had done it and he was asked back, I then said, could you tell me where you rehearse? And he said, at home. I said, are you in a basement downstairs, like a den? And he said, yeah. I said, aha, that's what I saw. And I just kept it to myself. I mean, I have moments where I see things and they give off auras and stuff like that. But I'm not creepy about it. I just am telling you that it has advised me many times in my life.
How well did you know Andy?
Quite well. You couldn't have a conversation very often with him. He and Rodney Dangerfield were very similar in that way. They didn't know how to talk with people.
Right.
Yeah, they only knew how to act up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. There are comedians. Well, there are people like that. You've got those two. You've got Andy. I mean, I knew Andy a little bit, and he was one of the most talented, strange people I have ever met in my life.
There won't be another one of them for a long time.
No, not at all. And Rodney, I knew when I was a kid. And from the Catskill Mountains, and he was hard to explain because he got into things he shouldn't have gotten into, unfortunately. But I remember him coming into the club in LA in pajamas and wanting to go on. Yeah. These are people that are constantly on. And another one was Robin. Robin was that until the later years. Every time you couldn't talk to Robin either without, and have a full conversation.
Yeah, I had one moment with Robin outside the club, and it was about a MC that had worked that night, and she was very nervous when she pulled him on. And she did okay, but she was nervous. I could tell that it didn't kind of feel like her clothes, And he did his thing, and he chewed up the room and took all the oxygen and the whole thing, and he did it well, you know.
Right.
And then later that night, we went to a place in Columbus called Columbus, and it was a bar and a restaurant. And we used to go there after hours, after 2 or 3 in the morning for the late night drink. And Marty Friedberg and I went there, and Robin was just leaving with Danny Aiello. And they were coming out, and we were going in, and I said to Robin in his ear, I said, I'm sorry if you were uncomfortable at any point at the club tonight. I had kind of a newbie MC. And she was good. It wasn't like it was embarrassing, but I just wanted to affirm with him because it was Jack Rollins and what have you. And he said, looked at me and he went, that's what I got back.
That was it, huh?
That was it.
Yeah.
And I never tried again. I never tried again.
Like I said, it's, I guess some people are just so insecure in the real world, you know. And
well, it's his ending certainly spoke to that. Yeah.
Yes. And so, you know, the comfort is being on stage and being in character or whatever character that you choose. I mean,
be protected.
These are people, Andy more than anybody else I know who pushed the envelope to see what the audience would take.
Yeah.
I mean, there were nights, and I've told these stories before, where Andy went on stage, had a table brought up, ordered dinner, and ate it and paid the check and left. That was his whole entire act.
Well, that's what we now found a category for it. They call it performance art.
Yeah.
And that's what he really was. He was a performing artist. And it was unusual in a comedy club.
Well, without a doubt it. But the funny thing is how the people accept that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you watch him do his Elvis. You watch him do.
Yeah. Well, that's what he brought back the second time. He brought back Elvis. Yeah.
He is extremely talented. Yeah. Silver, I want to thank you so much for doing this. We can go on for hours.
Your battery's running low. I got the signal.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah. Anyway, I want to tell you one thing. I listened to the Jack Knight interview conversation, right? And Jack was our first MC.
Right.
Yeah. And he became a family member. I just love Jack. So he took me to the hospital with my firstborn.
Do you know that I've known Jack since I was like 16 years old? I was like, he was my...
you mentored him. Did you mentor him?
Yeah. Somebody needs to mentor him. He was my first basketball coach at the YMCA when I was a kid. Yeah. And we're in touch he's been a friend for 50 years.
Once he's a friend, he is a friend.
Yes, he is.
Very loyal, yeah.
And he's I'm going to have him back on just as I want to have you back on. The stories are just amazing. And we haven't even scratched the surface.
Well, that's right. We haven't. I even brought literature with me.
What's that?
I even brought some literature with me.
Oh, what's that?
Paper, an article about when the Levity bought the Improv.
Oh.
And that goes back to 2018. And then I brought this, and this is my closer. Where did it go? Oh my God. Yeah, here. This is a literature from the club after 1980. You see the banner, the heading on my literature?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was, to clarify who the heck I am.
Well,
my pedigree.
It changed the entire concept of the club. Changed dramatically when Levity took over.
I heard a rumor in my ear directly to me. Oh, I think it was somebody in the inner world of comedy that said they wanted to bring back the old flavor of the original Improv. And I went, oh, maybe that's why they want me on the podcast.
Oh, no, not at all. The funny thing is, yes, the people that are running it now, Ali Reza and Caesar, these guys are working very hard to bring back the old flavor of the way the Improv was originally in LA,
Right.
and to try to get that feeling
Yeah.
back. It's a hard task. They're working hard at it. They're
Are
doing
they
a fairly
originally
good.
people that bought it, or are they the sub team after the buy?
They're part of the team. I don't think I don't. They don't own it, to my
But
knowledge.
they're part
I
of that.
think right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's AMC now is one of the. It
Yeah, I
changes
got it. I got it.
every.
Don't worry yourself.
Yeah, so
Um,
they are working hard to bring back the old flavor. Unfortunately, this whole thing happened.
I
You
understand,
know,
but I have ideas, and I want to tell you just one,
okay.
so that if they watch this, or you can share it with them somehow,
Mm-hmm.
they have an opportunity very soon when they start to open up what I call the bars and restaurants,
Mm-hmm.
that they should think about using the outside, not the inside. Don't bring people in. That garden part, the outer,
Yes.
yeah.
Well,
That's
that is what they're doing.
okay.
They
Okay.
already are doing that. They're just running into some technicalities with liquor licenses for outside.
Well,
That
they should start with that liquor.
yeah,
Put
that's
it up.
what
Yeah. Just
that's
open
what
up.
I
Just
will
open up.
definitely pass it on, and I'm pretty sure they watch these things because
Yeah.
they're behind this with me, and
Yeah. Yeah.
without them, I probably wouldn't
Well,
have
that's what I
started that.
figured. Yeah.
Yeah, because
The other thing that they could think about is calling it, for the summer, the Improv Comedy Camp. And I think a lot about the improv, even though I'm not part of it anymore. So, and I don't want a job or anything, I'm retired. But basically, they have a big opportunity just to make it wholesome,
Mhm.
just to make it wholesome. Forget the booze, because they're going to have drug problems. I mean, this is all wrapped around the legalization of grass.
Right.
It's
Well,
all, it is. Somebody got a hold
that's a
of some
great idea,
tricks.
and I will definitely pass it on. But
Yeah.
like I said, they'll watch this and they'll see it, especially because it's you, and it's
God help them. Yeah.
no,
Anyway,
it's something I wanted to say before we ended,
yeah.
and that is that you have two of the most unbelievable daughters that I have ever met in my life.
Oh my God, thank
For
you.
two girls that were brought up in the atmosphere and the environment that they were brought up in,
Yeah.
to be, to me, so just so well, I don't even know what the word is I was going to say,
Well, I call it
adjusted
balance. They're
or
balanced.
whatever. And
Pretty balanced.
I've told this to Zoe before. I mean, I love them both. They're both, I've known them, I don't know, since they were 15 or what have you,
Yeah, right.
and all, just Zoe and Beth and all. A lot of people don't know Beth the way they know Zoe
Well,
because she's
she's
up
not
north.
around as much, right?
Right. But I just wanted to tell you, you've got two of the greatest daughters in the
Well,
world.
thank you, Eddie. Thank
Period.
you.
And
I don't know how that happened.
well, I think it has a lot to do with the mother and father. It
Well,
definitely
I know
does.
that. I'm kidding.
I
I
know.
think
I know.
we were much
The
better parents than we thought we were. That's what I thought. I don't see it as I see it as an accomplishment, but I don't see it with our intention. Our intention, it's just like the club. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. You know what I mean?
yeah, and that's how things work. That's the best way to do it. People that have kids constantly ask me. They go like, you have any advice? And I tell them, I said, I'll give you the best advice anybody could give you. And that is, don't listen to anybody's advice.
Yeah.
Just go on your own
Right.
when you're raising your kids,
Right.
because everybody's going to tell you something else.
Right.
It's
I
a
know.
work in progress.
I just told my daughter a story about a very good friend that I lost, not because she died, but because I stopped seeing her. She came in New York when Beth was about, I guess, 10, 12 months old, nearing a year. And she was in the high chair. And my friend said, anyway, this friend asked if she could drop by, and Beth was having lunch. And I was sitting with her, and I said, sure, come on in. And she came to the building. She lived close by. And we were living near West End and 76th Street. Anyway, she came over, and Beth was still in the high chair. and she had applesauce on the tray of the apples of the high chair, and she was doing finger painting with the applesauce. And my friend went, "Oh, don't let her do that." And I said to my friend, "Do you have kids, Barbara?" Of course she didn't.
No.
And she said, "Not yet." And I said, "Well, when you do, you come over and they can face paint together and they can do some finger painting in the high chairs and whatever." And she didn't really appreciate my tone. And I never saw her again. I think we talked on the phone after that once, because people who tell you how to raise your kids, like you said, are way off. I mean, if they don't have kids, they're so far off, you can't even imagine why they'd open their mouth. But
advice
basically,
is very cheap, especially, like you said, from people that don't have kids.
yeah, right.
Yep.
So
Silver, I want to thank you so much. This was so great. I really do want to have you back on again at some point.
Okay.
This is
All right.
It's been great. And I want to send you off with one of our mementos, which is the shirt. I'm going to send this to you. It's Eddie's Bar at the Improv.
Okay.
And I'm going to send you a T-shirt. I'll get your address off the air. And again, thank you so much.
Dear, thank you for being a wonderful host.
Oh,
and really,
it's easy when I have somebody like you. And I also want to remind everybody about the Sandbox with
the Sandbox.
Shrek.
Of course, we're not airing. It's going to be on Zoom eventually, but we were building library and we were going to do audio only. And then this came along and we can't do anything right now.
Yep. Well, you'll get it going, I'm
Zoom,
sure.
The next phase. Yeah.
Anyway, again, Silver, I will.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. And Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks a lot.
This was a total honor to meet you and to hear you talk. This was great.
All right,
thank
dear.
you.
Thank you.
Tell Zoe I love her.
I will.
Thanks. Bye, Zoe.
Eddie, a hug to you, Eddie. A hug to you.
Thank you. You too.
All right, dear. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.